Good morning and good afternoon. Super excited to be here today with Katy Olson, who is the editor of Arc Digest AD Pro. And my name is Risa Eldon. If you haven't met me before, thank you again for joining us. I am the head of partnerships and events here at Ivy. Ivy is a business management tool for home professionals meant to help streamline your overall workflow, from creating specification sheets to invoices to proposals to taking online payments. We really want to help you take your business to the next level and stay organized. So I'll chat a little bit more about what Ivy does at the end of our session, but I'm just so thrilled that Katy is joining us and going to be telling us everything that we need to know about sustainability. And just a brief background about Katy. She has held roles in editorial and content strategy, including executive editor of Business of Home, People Magazine, and Work Style. She's received her MS with honors from Columbia University and a Bachelor of Arts in English. So she knows how to read and write better than me. From Fordham University. She's a Reiki master and a native New Yorker. And Katy is going to be covering sustainability today and telling us why it's a mere buzzword and more of it's an imperative that designers are heeding. And designers, home professionals, builders, everybody needs to be aware of. Katy will unpack AD Pro's most recent sustainability package, which covers products that both are green and beautiful to sustain practices that home professionals can adopt and start implementing immediately. Super important. I know this comes up a lot in our private Facebook forum, and we are just thrilled that you are going to tell us everything that we need to know. So without further ado, I'll let you take over, Katy.
Thank you so much, Risa. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'll give you a little background about AD Pro. It is Architectural Digest community for the interior designer, as well as people in adjacent trades. So that might be, architects or landscape designers. We really cater to the design community. And we've been working on the sustainability package for a couple months now. And essentially what we were hearing from designers was that they want to hear how they can make it a little bit easier to adopt these practices while also not impacting their bottom line in a negative way. So we compiled a number of features over the last few months, as I said, and we launched our sustainability package about a couple of weeks ago. And I'm here to help unpack it and help you understand how some of these practices can actually improve your bottom line. Some of the products that we sourced are just flat out beautiful, so we want to share some of those. As you might have noticed in the promotion for this webinar, we're also going to introduce you to a woodworker who is really kind of a secret source for some architects. And I'll also explain how you can pitch me so that you can get your projects published. And hopefully the tips that I share with you about publishing can help you reach out to magazines and websites of all kinds. So I look forward to taking your questions, and I will start with, how can I get LEED accredited and what does that even mean? We'll dive right into that. And of course, you know that you'll be able to access this after the fact, and I'm happy to share links with anybody who requests them so that you can get a lot of these facts in order. I know it's a little dry, but it's very important, especially when it comes to LEED accreditation. So the first thing to know is that LEED accreditation is not the same thing as LEED certification. So you can see, buildings like the Central Metro Park in New Jersey, which we've covered in Architectural Digest, Renzo Piano's building in Athens, and even Washington, D.C. These are all LEED certified entities. People like interior designers are LEED accredited. So you might have heard the term LEED certified. It's actually LEED accredited, and you need to get an accreditation if you'd like to promote and market yourself as a LEED accredited designer. So how can an environmentally conscious interior designer become LEED accredited, and what does that mean? So the accreditation that you would likely be interested in if you're an interior designer is the LEED Interior Design and Construction. It's LEED IDC. So what this means, and in our reporting, we reached out to a number of people at the USGBC. Micah Silvery, he's a director there. She's a director there. And so what it means is, she says, is a LEED credential indicates proficiency in today's sustainable design, construction, and operations standards. Over 200,000 professionals around the world have earned a LEED credential. So becoming a LEED AP requires individuals to develop a fundamental knowledge of green building concepts. This includes transportation, energy, water, and air quality. Someone who holds a LEED AP ID plus C is also an expert specifically, in interior design and construction. So the goal of this is really, it's very holistic accreditation. And I mean that in terms of, you have to consider all of these building concepts. As they say, transportation, energy, water, and air quality. So how do you start? And again, you'll be able to access this information later on, and I'm happy to walk people through it. But essentially, there are 4 steps. So first, you have to be an interior designer. You also have to be over age 18. You'll have to pass the first exam, which is the LEED Green Associate exam. This covers the basics. It's also possible to take this LEED basic exam plus the specialty exam at the same time. It just depends on how, what stage you're at personally. If you've already taken the Green Associate exam, then it's time to move on to the next. Or if you'd like to do both in one shot, it's fine. You can do that. So becoming a LEED AP requires you to develop a fundamental knowledge of these concepts, right? That's what we discussed on the earlier page. So this is what you're going to be quizzed on, when you take the exam. So the next step is you create an account on the USGBC site, you choose the exam or exams, and you schedule the test date and location. So there's a fee involved each time you take the exam. It's $250 for members and $350 for non-members. That is for the ID&C only exam. If you're going to take the full exam, so that's both the Green Associate and the AP, it's $400 for members and $550 for non-members. To prepare for the test or the tests, depending on what you choose to take, you first want to get your hands on the LEED AP ID&C Candidate Handbook. So the organization offers study plans. It also offers an intensive 4-week step-by-step guide. We've also seen a number of LEED study books on the market as well as webinars. You can check out the Green Building Education Services organization. They have a list of resources. They also have a pack of study tools that you can purchase. It includes study sheets, practice tests, flashcards, and an on-demand webinar. So there are a lot of resources out there. I would encourage you to take a look at what we've recommended here. There are some other ones that are available on Amazon, but these are ones that our reporter on the story had specifically recommended based on all the experts that she had interviewed. The last step is the actual exam or exams. So they're each 2 hours, 100 questions, and they have multiple choices. You take it via computer, and essentially your score is displayed as soon as you take it. So if anyone has taken the SAT, as I have had to multiple times, this is a little bit, it's not quite as stressful because at least you know your answer immediately. I had to wait a few weeks when I took my SAT. So if you take the first, if you only take one test, it's 2 hours. If you take both, it's a total of 4 hours, and it'll be broken into 2 parts. Within 72 hours, your results will be processed, and if you passed, then your credentials will be updated with the organization. You will have to continue this in order to renew your certification, or to keep it current. You'll need to take 30 continuing education hours every 2 years. So if you're a member of, there's some interior design organizations that require those continuing ed credits, you're familiar with how that works. So how can I use my LEED accreditation to better my bottom line? So part of the reason that we at AD Pro were interested in producing this package is because we heard from a lot of designers who were interested in understanding sustainability better and also marketing themselves to their customers as being, or their potential clients, as being aware of sustainability practices. So once you pass this exam, you can begin promoting yourself as a LEED accredited professional. So earning a LEED AP credential provides credibility, and it validates an interior designer or other professionals' knowledge and experience. It also means they become part of a global community of professionals dedicated to green building. In the process, LEED accredited professionals also become an asset to their firms and organizations. So what this means is that often you can compete for projects that you might not ordinarily have access to. It's also a great way to market yourself to potential clients who are, sustainability conscious. And you can also have access to different types of clients who are specifically seeking out green building practices. It also enables you to network better. You can reach out to people who have the same accreditation and ask them for assistance, job leads, etc. So now that we've gotten through that, and I know that one is a bit data heavy, so again, please feel free to share questions with me towards the end. I'm happy to share resources as well so we can get you the information that you need if you're interested in pursuing this. Guidelines for sourcing products sustainably. So this is a great feature that we recently shared. It's really interesting. So essentially similar to the LEED accreditation, the word that comes to mind here is also holistic. It's considering, in this case, each aspect of the supply chain. So whether you're an interior designer, a product designer, an architect, somebody working in an adjacent industry, you want to look at the whole picture here. So a good place to start is the materials. So it's not like organic, right, where we can simply avoid eating apples that aren't, grown organically and instead opt for something that's a little bit more healthy. This is not quite the same thing. So it's not as simple as avoiding woods, textiles, fabrics of certain kinds. What you really need to look out for is whether the resources that you're using and that your supply chain is using are purchased or come from legal and sustainable sources. So this is a really big ask, right? Anybody who's tried to source sustainably has probably run into a lot of information online, and not all of it is very organized or very clear. So one thing that we found when we were producing this package is that a very reliable way to get into this is to look for certain accreditations. So you want to look for the Global Organic Textile Standards, that's GOTS. You can also look into Green Guard certification programs and the Forest Stewardship Council, the FSC certification. So each of these organizations review a number of manufacturers, some of them from as far away as Asia and Africa. And it's notable because often, as you probably know, these are places that firms of all kinds who are cost conscious often travel and do their manufacturing there because it's much cheaper. At the same time, as we found, ecological and ethically compliant criteria are not always strictly implemented in those continents and also in those nations there. An endorsement from organizations such as these, so GOTS, Green Guard, FSC, it's really important. Essentially, it's a seal of approval. Another thing to consider. So the first thing we're considering, right, is the materials. Have they been procured ethically? Have they brought any damage in their production? The next thing you want to consider is emission levels, carbon footprint, and other factors. So for this piece, we interviewed Josh Jacobs. He is at UL Environment, which runs the Green Guard certification program. Jacobs is the director of codes and standards. So what he recommends is, again, it comes back to that holistic view. To really grasp the environmental impact a piece of furniture or a building will have, you have to be able to know the emission levels, embedded carbon footprint, energy, and composition of the pieces that put it together. So it's understanding all these different components. So depending on the complexity of the piece of furniture or the building, the particular area in which you're working, it's really important to consider those things. Again, it's emission levels, it's the carbon footprint, the energy, and the composition. Because if we don't have a full understanding of each of those elements, it's really hard to, weigh the cost. Is this worth the cost? Is this worth the environmental cost? Green Guard's findings are available in its easy-to-use online database. It's called SPOT, or Sustainable Product Database. This is really cool. It's a searchable database where you can essentially browse their findings. It's free for suppliers, architects, designers, retailers, and I believe it's open to the general public. But it gives a really clear, if detailed explanation of exactly what goes into these different pieces. So it's important, and this really applies, we found, across all our reporting to whether you're sourcing product, whether you're going about your day and trying to maybe put finishing touches, styling a finalized project, an interior. look beyond the preconceptions about sustainable materials. So wood is a really great example of this. Wood is, we often hear about how wood is a very sustainable, smart choice. When we spoke to Brad Kahn, he's the FSC's communication director, he explained it a little bit more, he was a little more in depth about it, a little bit more thoughtful than what even I considered before. So he says what their organization looks at is how well the forests are taken care of. 80% of land biodiversity comes from forests. 1.6 billion people base their livelihood on woodlands. How are they being affected from logging and deforestation? These are essential aspects of the sustainability discourse and more crucial than the type of wood itself. So, you know, the other editors and I have heard how designers often feel and architects often feel, well, this particular kind of wood is more sustainable than others. But again, it comes back to that holistic idea. We need to consider these other factors, not just the type of wood, but how are the people who are involved in the production of this wood being taken care of? How is the land itself being taken care of? So as he says, you might think I'll just buy local. And that's often something we hear too here at AD. But that's not necessarily the best solution. If you live in Seattle, a Southeast Asian wood like teak will make a more durable garden table than, say, US-sourced white pine. In that case, the benefit from flying it in, the fact that it will last longer, easily outweighs the impact of its travel emissions. So again, this is where he's bringing up the fact that you might be able to go down to the local lumber yard, but consider the use. How is the piece in question going to be used by the client that you're building it for or buying it for? Do they plan to use it forever? Ideally, right? That's part of sustainability. Buying something, continuing to use it, having a very long life expectancy for this piece, right? So when you're building, whether it's a piece of furniture or maybe it's, you know, a home, it's considering the use on top of those other considerations. So we're considering the lives and the livelihoods of the people who are producing the wood. We're considering the land that it comes from. We're considering the use that our client is going to have out of the piece that we're creating. And we're also considering travel emissions, as he mentioned in this last quote. So there may be a situation, as in this hypothetical, where the travel emissions, the benefit of the wood is actually outweighing the damage the travel emissions are causing. So some questions you might want to consider: how is this piece of wood going to be used? And how do I make something that will really last? So another guideline: rely on approved organizations and beware of greenwashing. So greenwashing, essentially, I mean, I guess the food equivalent might be when you see something that says all natural. It's a nice slogan, but there's nothing really behind it. It's not like seeing an organic certification, right? So for this part of this package, we spoke to Ecobalance's CEO. So that's Amy Robinson. Her furniture company has been around for, I believe, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if it's 10 years. I think it's 10 or 20 years. I'd have to double check, but she was one of the early their company is one of the early pioneers of organic and eco furniture. So she warns against any claim or guarantee that doesn't come from a major institution. And some of those institutions that I mentioned earlier are a good example of claims that we feel you can trust. So she told us that there's a lot of greenwashing, and most of it is just marketing play with no science behind it. She says that she's wary of any mark or shiny logo that isn't official. So some of the ones that she called out, which we mentioned also, are GreenGuard, GOTS, FSC certified, and USDA organic. So what happens if you can't find a certified material? I would love to hear what you all do after we move to our question session. But what we found in our research and talking to these experts is that it's smart to look for alternatives. One designer actually told us he said essentially he'll reconsider the entire project if he can't find a material that works, you know, a material that he feels confident in. He will reconsider doing it. Another option, if you're not able or willing to reconsider doing the project in question, you can look for alternatives. You can also choose family-owned and organic partners. So one of Amy Robinson's suggestions was to support local, independently run suppliers, whether they're in the United States or, further flung. She mentions Romania. It's looking for these kinds of suppliers who can offer traditional crafts that are at risk of being forgotten, integrative methods that are not detrimental to the environment. So this is really about cultural awareness too, understanding where we're sourcing from, understanding that our purchases and our clients' money, right, can actually impact artists all over the world, and making smart decisions based on, our education, our awareness that some of these traditional crafts, as she says, are at risk of being forgotten. So how can we support them and also not be detrimental to the environment? So it's a tight balance for sure. So the next suggestion, research your supply chain. So designers, especially those working on a larger scale, such as in hospitality or commercial design, are in a unique position because you're interacting directly or indirectly with, sometimes tens or hundreds of artisans and workers of many different stripes. So ethical work practices, transparent facilities, and economically equitable production process are all aspects that have to be addressed when you're choosing manufacturers and partners. So for this, we spoke with Flora Davidson. She's co-founder of the London and Mumbai-based Supply Compass. Supply Compass is a design-to-delivery sourcing platform. It connects brands with a vetted manufacturer network, and it also helps manage their exchanges. So what she recommended was, as she says, certifications should be followed religiously. But what's also important is to find a shared mindset. So if you define what a good factory looks like beyond certifications, as she says, define within your own design practice, what am I willing to do to be sustainable? What kind of partner do I want? In a way, we're voting with our money, right? We're whenever we use, whether it's us funding different aspects of our business or taking a client's money, making purchases for them, in a way, we're casting a vote for the world that we'd like to live in. So what she recommends is asking exactly that. What does a good factory look like beyond the certifications? Once you've done your research, that's great. But as she points out, you really want that shared mindset. You want to find people who you trust. Of course, they should be certified as well. But as she puts it, it's about finding people who share your approach and building relationships with them. Next, and this can be a tricky one, and we can talk about client relations later because I would love to hear your thoughts. Educate your clients and be prepared to justify the extra costs. So you and your client will likely need to pay more to ensure you're sustainably and ethically sourcing. Everyone that we interviewed for this package confirmed that they're paying higher prices for both resources and manufacturers. So we spoke with Travis Nagel. He founded the sustainable firm Medley, and he says there's no cutting corners, and the reality is an ethical design business is going to be more expensive. But what you have to think of is that you're creating and selling an investment, not just for one's home, but for people's health and the planet. Being a sustainable furniture company, to me, is about making items that can really last for years and never harm the planet. So this is something that this is not quantifiable per se, but something that I've noticed in my years in the design industry is that the designers who take a stand and implement these kinds of practices wind up attracting a kind of client who's also willing to justify the extra cost. It's kind of like what we were speaking about earlier with the LEED certification and LEED accreditation, excuse me. See, even I confuse the two. When you're a LEED accredited designer, you're then able to market yourself as such. And so if you're sort of embedding this kind of sustainability-minded ethos into your design business, you're likely going to attract, and I've seen design businesses do this, attract clients who are interested in that. So while there may be, there will be some extra costs, honestly, if you're doing the work to make sure these things are ethical and sustainable. As Travis told us, every component counts. Every aspect of this counts. You'll be able to build these pieces into your design business so that when a client comes to you and says, I'd like you, to get this for under this price, you'll be able to say, well, I'd love to do that, but these are the reasons why that's not possible. And then you can in turn educate them on what goes into making something ethical and sustainable. It's not easy, but exactly as all our interviewees specified, it's something that we can really, as members of the design industry, exert a huge impact. So next, something a little more visual, because I know we're all visual people. An insider's look at the work of one woodworking mastermind. So this was a really fun story. So Evan Shipley, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, he is an arborist, a mill master, a lumber legend. He calls himself a sawyer. So essentially for the last 20 years, he's operated this timber business. It's called Arborica. It's located just north of San Francisco. And he essentially is sourcing his wood exclusively through salvaged trees. So these are trees that have not been harvested for commercial purposes. So that's Evan. And we got to speak with him and an architecture firm based in San Francisco about his work. And I would encourage you, I can share the story with you all later in our comments section, but it's a really fascinating profile we did of him. 20 years ago, he began his practice by rescuing these trees that fell. And if he didn't rescue them, they were set to go through a chipper. And today he has about 5 acres and he has a small forest worth of salvaged timber. He also has these massive warehouses, which you can see in this image here. It's him with his team. And that's where he has these huge cuts of wood. You can see that huge piece there. And this is an example of some of the work that he's done. So these were 3 pine logs. And he did this project with Envelope Architecture and Design based on the West Coast. And if you're in San Francisco or plan to be there soon, you can check it out, the Rat House Beer Hall, which is located there. So these are 3 sustainably salvaged pieces, and he transformed them into seating and a bar. And you can see it's just such a beautiful way that it's integrated into the space. We actually asked for more photos, but they sign, they're only able to share these. Sometimes it's difficult to get photos, but I've seen some of his work aside from these pieces, and it's really incredible to see how he can take something that was destined to go through the wood chipper and turn it into something that's really beautiful. And it also doesn't scream any particular philosophy. It's beautiful in its own right, which is something that we really appreciate at AD. So that brings us to some of our favorite sustainable products. So I'm not sure how many were at Salone del Mobile last April, but we had this incredible installation that we saw. So this was commissioned by Sunbrella, and textile designer Liz Collins transformed this room. So she took Sunbrella's discarded salvages. So similar to Evan, who's taking these felled trees and doing something really incredible with them, Liz Collins created what she called a fur room. So these are pieces of discarded textiles, and you can see they look a little bit furry and colorful. So here's some more. There's also some customized furniture from Lynn Rosé, furniture and lighting, which you can see here. Really gorgeous. And again, it's repurposing that material that would, otherwise go unused or unwanted. So some of our other favorite products. So Art, if you're familiar with that firm, they created this handmade timber wallpaper collection. It used Paulownian wood, excuse me, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. And it creates 4 tessellated and tile-like patterns. So what's really interesting about this is because it's a natural material, not only do you have that really nice tactile experience when you touch it, but it's also naturally humidity controlling. It's available in 28 different hues. You can find more information about that on art-international.com. This is really great. So Paola Lenti, I'm sure you're familiar with her and her firm. She launched also, I believe, at Milan Design Week, Lido and Ioli furniture collections. So she uses like a really special molded plastic technology. It's called, I think, polyolefin. And it's much more sustainable than other kinds of materials. So it's completely recyclable. So the one that we see here is the Lido lounge chair setting. Here's another setting shown outside, really beautiful. So her firm was founded 25 years ago, and it was one of the first brands to use recyclable high-tech outdoor materials. They also have a commitment to using local resources and craftspeople. So most of the materials that they use are natural materials like wood and stone, metals, or plastic similar to the one on the previous page, which is recyclable. This is really beautiful, and I hope I don't butcher his name. Alvaro Catalan de Oson's PET lamps. So these are textile-based lamps, but they're actually comprised in part of disposable water bottles. I wish I had a bigger picture because this doesn't do it justice, but you can definitely check them out more on his website. Really beautiful work, so elegant. And the last one that we found, these are specifically from our time in Milan, was this really cool collaboration. So this is between Bethann Gray and Nature Squared. And so the main feature of this is its iridescence. So they launched a collection called Exploring Eden. It includes stools, tables, and other pieces. So, you know, I would recommend going to their site because there's just an incredible amount of pieces there that are really, really stunning and using sustainable materials. And the materials that actually would have gone wasted if they were not repurposed. So this, I have a feeling, is where we're going to have most of our questions. So how to pitch your sustainable projects to AD Pro. And I would suggest that these tips might work even if it's not a sustainable project that you're pitching. These might be helpful even if it's a different news outlet that you're pitching. I think many of these can be takeaways that will just help you be your own best PR person. So tip number 1, research the site or magazine you're pitching before you pitch. So this might be redundant for people who have worked with, you know, a dedicated PR person for years. But just to reiterate that, you know, doing your homework pays dividends. As an editor for, oh my gosh, maybe almost 15 years, there's no better way to annoy me or one of us than to send an incomplete or a never-ending email. So really, it's in your best interest to know your potential audience. And just a side note, I've looked at projects more deeply because the email that came attached to them was polite, to the point, and included all the details. And in that same vein, if I'm really busy, I'll overlook an email with beautiful images because the email is just too long and not clear. So I might set it aside and hope to come back to it. But the point is that the simpler the email and the more detailed it is, you know, with the details that we need, nothing superfluous, the more likely you're going to get our attention. So at AD Pro, speaking of knowing your audience, what we produce is news. So that includes international, national, and regional news, feature stories, and trend reports. And our trend reports are basically mini magazines. During any given week, we publish between 6 to 8 stories per day. So that's a lot of content, believe me. So some suggestions: explore the site and identify where your news or your project might fit. So some of the news that we cover are showroom openings. So if you're opening a new showroom or partnering with other designers to, you know, open a space, that could be of interest to us. Maybe there's a house that you completed that's sustainably designed. That might be interesting. The next step after you identify if there's a similar, you know, essentially you want to make sure that what you're pitching us is something that we would cover. So once you confirm that by exploring our site, you then identify the editor of that section. So if you're pitching AD Pro, you can find our masthead online. And as you probably know, the masthead is where they list each of the sections of the magazine or the website, followed by the name of the editor who runs that section. After that, you can have your PR team, or if you're doing it yourself, you reach out to the editor with your pitch. Next, deliver your editor what she or he needs. So our news editor, Madeline, she says that frequently the details that she needs are buried, scattered, or take a lot of back and forth to extrapolate, excuse me. So you can save her and the rest of us time by providing the following details up front in your correspondence. And this, I can tell you, is really important to me because we get a lot of emails. They're often automatically generated. It's a really generic press release. And if we see these details up front, we're much more likely to respond. So the first one, the upcoming launch date, such as for a collection, or opening date, such as for a showroom or show house you're participating in. Notice we said upcoming. It's imperative that you share the news with us as far in advance as you can so that we can plan for coverage. Just be sure you have enough information to share. So what that means is if you only have the date and you don't have the location of the show house, you don't have the name of the charity that it's benefiting or the other media outlets that are potentially involved, you might want to wait until you have a tipping point of information. So for a show house, for example, I would say that would be the location, even if it's just the town, other participants, the names of the rooms that each of the other designers are participating in, and maybe some of the brands that are involved, as well as the opening date. That way we can start to think on our side about story coverage. How can we cover this? Is there anybody we should be interviewing? Who are the people at play here? Number 2, whether or not we can have the exclusive. So what does that mean? Depending on the story, this means that your news appears on our site first, sometimes only on our site. It can also mean that you share special details with us that aren't shared elsewhere, or that we have the right to post the story before other sites or magazines. So exclusives are really important. They often help us decide to cover a story that we might not ordinarily cover, because it means that we're getting the word out first. And especially AD Pro, we were launched about 2 years ago, but we relaunched in April as a membership site. So we're building up our rapport with designers like you. So whenever we can share news exclusively, whether that's a couple hours before you go live with the news elsewhere, it can really improve our relationship with the designer. We like having direct contact with you so that we can work on stories together. And it's just a nice thing to offer us, even if we're not able to take you up on it. I should backtrack with that. If you're not able to offer us the exclusive in terms of time, so giving us the story first thing on the morning, say you give it to us 9 and we get to go live with it on our site at 9 in the morning on Monday, and then you push it out via the newswire or via your PR person a couple hours later. If we can't have that, another alternative is to give us maybe an exclusive interview, exclusive quotes. So instead of just reusing the quotes that we receive in a press release, we'll get a one-on-one interview with you. That is always a really good thing to offer us in this initial email. Third, we would like to see high-res, high-quality press images. So in this initial email, you'll want to include a selection of professional images. I would say you can choose the best ones to attach, a handful. We do not need 10 or 15 or 20 images in an email. I would say 5 is a nice number. Or you can share a wider selection via a Dropbox or WeTransfer link in your email. And we always give bonus points, so to speak, for including the photographer's credit and courtesy information and confirming in a timely way that we have the rights to publish these images. I've also included a link here too if you need any help with selling your design firm services by using interior photography. For that story, we talked to a number of really successful designers, Instagram influencers, photographers about different tips for marketing yourself with high quality interior photography, even if you don't have the budget to hire someone. Lastly, and this is a suggestion that came from our news editor, is in that initial email that, the pitch email that you're sending to one of us, confirm that a phone or an in-person interview is possible. This is particularly useful when it's a really big launch. So if it's a big collection launch and you're getting a lot of coverage throughout the country, different news outlets, it's really useful for us to know that you're willing to do a phone or an in-person interview. So this is our site. This is our current homepage. And this suggestion comes from our deputy editor. So think global, pitch local. For projects specifically, she says, we look for projects in our regional markets that haven't been published widely and have professional images for our regional project spotlights. So currently we're focusing on these areas in the US. That doesn't mean we don't cover other regions. It's essentially sort of like guideposts for our coverage. And within New York, LA, San Francisco, Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, and Dallas, we have a little bit of wider berth to cover. I'd say, exactly as Ali mentioned, regional project spotlights. So a project in Miami might need to be, super, super newsworthy in order to appear on our news section. But to appear in our regional section, we might have a smaller level project located in Houston because we're targeting that audience and we're building up our brand in those markets. I'm here to discuss in further depth more about that and how we approach our regional coverage when we get to the question section, because I know that can be confusing. But this regional, the regional coverage is really a great place for designers who are either based in these cities or working in these cities to get published. So think global, pitch local. And now we're at our questions section. So I look forward to hearing from you all.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Katy. That was really informative, really, really important information. So a couple questions. One, we had a question about clarification, and this was about 20 minutes ago into your presentation, but it was, if you were saying Green Guard USDA organic is not official?
No, that is official.
Oh, that is official. Okay. Great. So we got that clarity. Question answered. And then also, just for the audience, make sure that you're asking your questions under the section that says ask a question so that we have everything in one place. Another question we had is, are you finding that clients who want sustainable materials also care about other types of ethical sourcing, like made in the USA, fair trade, artisan made?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I've seen that, and anecdotally, I've heard that as well, that if you tend to care about how something's been produced, you also tend to care about the people whose lives it impacts. But that's one type of consumer. Then I think there's another type of consumer or client who might be aware of one piece of the puzzle, but it takes a little bit of education to get them to understand, for example, with the wood sourcing. Yes, this type of material is considered sustainable, but if you live in this area of the country, the cost, the environmental cost may outweigh its sustainability impact. So I find that, again, anecdotally through the designers that I hear from and through walking High Point Market, often it takes a little bit of a push to get clients to understand that it's not just that one piece. It's part of a bigger piece. But I do think that if they're already concerned about the sustainability of a project, it's an easy sell to get them to go to the next level and think about the ethics of production. It's just a matter of what I've seen is if the designer is educated and kind of rehearses their pitch, so to speak, and really cares about these issues, it's a much easier sell on the client.
That makes sense. That's really good advice. And then in terms of pitching, I think you really covered everything that I get. We could see so many questions about pitching projects, private Facebook group. And I think you really covered a majority of the things that I see come up. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we see in terms of emailing, like and I think you covered this a little bit, but just to reiterate, would somebody then email you directly, or does it go into like a main inbox? How does that work?
Sure. It depends. If you already have a direct contact with one of us, or your press team or your PR person already has a direct contact, I would suggest reaching out to them with a really, if you know that they've covered that pitch, for example. So say you've worked with Madeline on our team who covers national news, and she often writes about show houses, and you or your press person wants to pitch us on a show house, you can send a simple email letting her know, look, this show house is coming up. I'm going to be participating in it. Are you going to be covering it again?
Okay.
If it's something that's totally unrelated to what she covers, but you know that we cover it elsewhere on the site, I would encourage you to reach out to your contact and ask her who the best contact is. I get those questions a lot.
Okay.
And from the designer perspective, it's a little bit more, it's always nicer to have a personal email. And from a designer perspective, it's nice to not email an anonymous email address, to email a human.
Yeah, to a real person. And what about, and you might have covered this as well, but I saw this come up a couple times recently, actually, in our Facebook group, just about how to send images and a Dropbox, and sometimes a Dropbox can be annoying, and different publications like things submitted different ways. So what is your best recommendation there?
Sure. I mean, I think in an ideal world, every designer who wants to be published cultivates a relationship with an editor or an editorial assistant who can help them at the publication that they're interested in, right?
Yeah.
Or they have a PR person who's skilled enough that their PR person already has these relationships and knows the individual preferences for each editor.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm a minimalist. I prefer low-res images just so I can scan through them, maybe 5 max. With a Dropbox link to the high-res images and confirmation that we have the rights to publish them.
Got it.
I find that anything more than 3 to 5 images attached to an email can become really bulky and unmanageable.
Yeah.
But again, it's
potentially go to your spam, and right? That it could potentially go to your spam if you have many images. So
very true.
Then the message doesn't even get across. Great.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I'll leave it to anybody else. If there's any other questions, somebody had mentioned, I thought it was a really helpful comment saying, she said you could source natural stone from companies that have certified to sustainability metrics by a third party through the NSC. And she dropped in the link for that too. So I thought that was really interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Great. Thank you for that.
Fabulous. Well, I think that's a wrap on questions. I don't see anything else coming in here. If you guys want to stick on and learn a little bit about Ivy, I'll answer your questions in specific about our business management software. And Katy, thank you so much for joining us today. Super helpful information. If somebody wants a copy of this presentation, are they able to get a copy from us? They can totally email me and I can share it.
Great. Yeah. And I would also suggest anyone who's interested in joining AD Pro, Reese is going to drop a link so you can get 20% off your subscription in the chat box, I think. So, and if you need any help with that, please feel free to reach out and email me. I believe you have my email in that presentation, and feel free to pitch me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Katy. And really enjoyed your presentation today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Reese. Have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Well, that was super informative, really great tips from Katy. And I just wanted to share a little bit more about what Ivy does. Obviously, a big thing for us is educating our industry and bringing you guys the most relevant content. So I think that Katy really brought really important tips that will help you become a better designer, builder, architect, whoever you might be, and really pitching your projects to your clients, not just for press, but all around. So let me share my screen and tell you a little bit more about Ivy. If you don't know, as I said before, we are built to help you really take your business to the next level, organize everything in one place. Key features that I want to make sure I go over that have really helped me. I used to run a design firm like 5 years ago. It's just the basics, right? Tracking your time, making sure your employees, everybody's in the same place. So Ivy is based in the cloud. We have an app that you can use on your phone as well. And you can easily track your time on the go from the app, and then you can go ahead and send out invoices to your clients. You can get paid online. So it really makes everything super easy, all in one place. And your clients will love it because they can pay you, they can use their credit card. Makes it so much easier so that you can really be focusing on what you like to do, which I hope is design. And this is what the invoice looks like when you send it to your clients. They have the option to pay right here, and then the money goes straight into your bank account. Another big pain point that we hear from designers a lot is sourcing. And when you're going and you're finding all of these images, you have screenshots across your desktop. So with Ivy, you can actually go into your supplier's website and you can go ahead, and we have this little Ivy leaf that nests on your browser. It's an extension, and it allows you to clip the product directly from the supplier's website. You can add different images in, you can add the product title. So super quick and easy. Again, this doesn't just work for furniture, it works for paint schedules, it works for plumbing, anything and everything that you're specifying, you can find here. And then you can add your costs, you can add your purchase fee in here as well, and Ivy will even calculate that for you. So really just streamlining the way that you're running your overall business to help you save time, help you save money. You can add it directly to a project, and you can of course add the full product details like the SKU, the manufacturer, save the product, and you can really build out your own product library. So then when I go to create my proposal, I have everything right there. I can even create a room board. I can send it back and forth to my client till we decide what that perfect final item is that we're going to specify. And then I can move from a proposal to an invoice to a purchase order. And it's really, really easy. Ivy even builds your specification sheets, your tear sheets for you. So again, less legwork for you, less overhead if you have an assistant that's doing this work for you. You have a project schedule with to-do lists. Again, I used to do this in 3 separate systems. So Ivy really helps centralize your overall workflow. And then of course, creating your project tracker, your project schedule, your FF&E schedule all in one place. So when it comes to the procurement part of the process, you really have all of your ducks in a row. Organizes all of your vendors with your accounts and passwords. That's one thing that drove me crazy. I had 10 different Excel spreadsheets, and everything's all in one place. Super easy, super user-friendly. Anybody in your team can access this. One other thing that I wanted to mention is reporting, obviously super important. You can pull reports through your Ivy account for transactions, project payments, purchase orders, sales tax liability. And then one thing that's really important for us is to make sure that you have access to all of our industry webinars. You get a dedicated account manager where you can access Ivy training. And then of course you get access to our private Facebook group where we're really building a sense of community and leveraging the help of other home professionals, other architects, other designers, other builders, really bringing everybody together. So if you are a designer and you're looking for a builder, you can say, hey, like I'm located in San Diego. Do you know any builders in San Diego? Super helpful. You can also go to our Discover section where you can find somebody to help you with 3D renderings or a business coach. Really helpful to have kind of everything all in one place. So definitely want to make sure that if you do have questions, you go ahead and contact us. I will drop my email into the blurb right here as long as Katy's information. And then if you want a copy of the deck presentation, you can email me as well. And then this link is actually recorded. So if you missed any of this presentation, you can go back to the beginning. We'll make sure to email you out a recap of the presentation as well. So a couple other exciting things coming up on the horizon. So if you are in our Facebook group, stay tuned for exciting events this fall and then at High Point Market. And if you want to reach me, I'll go ahead and drop my email in. It's just Reisa, REISA @ivy.co. I'll drop that in. And thank you so much again to everybody for joining us. And we'll see you soon.